Most brides worry about rain on their wedding day. Lina Montero should have worried about the woman in the wheelchair. While 300 guests clinked champagne glasses at the Grand Meridian Hotel, celebrating her marriage to wealthy investor Graham Voss, one uninvited observer sat in the shadows, Graham's ex-wife, Naomi Reyes. The divorce had been finalized exactly 7 hours earlier. Naomi wasn't crying, she wasn't causing a scene. She was simply watching, a slight smile playing at her lips, like someone who already knew the punchline to a very long, very expensive joke. And in her lap sat a leather notebook, the beginning of something that would destroy everything. Before we dive into this story, I want to invite you to stay until the very end to see how justice unfolds in the most unexpected way. If you're enjoying this, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let's begin. The champagne was Dom Perignon. The flowers were imported orchids. The wedding cake stood 5 tiers tall, decorated with edible gold leaf that caught the light from 3 crystal chandeliers. Everything about Graham Voss's wedding to Lina Montero screamed money, taste, and careful planning. Everything except the woman in the wheelchair near the service entrance, half hidden by an elaborate floral arrangement. Naomi Reyes adjusted the cashmere throw across her lap and took a slow sip of sparkling water. Her wheelchair was positioned at an angle that gave her a perfect view of the reception without being immediately visible to the wedding party. The hotel staff had been confused when she'd arrived. An elegant woman in her late 30s, dark hair swept into a simple chignon, wearing a dove-gray dress that probably cost more than most of the servers made in a month. "Ma'am, are you here for the Voss wedding?" the young woman at the reception desk had asked, her fingers hovering uncertainly over the guest list. "I am," Naomi had replied, her voice steady and calm. "Though I doubt I'm on the official roster. I'm Graham's ex-wife. We signed our divorce papers this morning." The desk clerk's eyes had widened, but to her credit, she'd maintained her professional composure. I see. Would you like me to— "No need to announce me," Naomi had said smoothly. "I'm just here to observe. I'll stay out of the way." And she had. For the past 2 hours, she'd watched the ceremony from a distance, witnessed the first dance, observed the champagne toasts. She'd seen Graham spin his new bride around the polished marble floor, his hand on the small of Lina's back in exactly the way it used to rest on hers. She'd watched Lina throw her head back and laugh, that practiced musical laugh that sounded so spontaneous until you'd heard it enough times to recognize the performance. Naomi pulled out her phone and opened the voice recording app. She'd been documenting observations all evening, small details that a novelist's eye couldn't help but catalog. "The bride touches her throat when she lies," she murmured into the phone, her voice barely above a whisper. She did it twice while talking to Graham's mother about how they met. Graham's tells are the same as always. He looks just over the left shoulder of whoever he's lying to, never quite meeting their eyes. They just told his business partner they've known each other for 8 months. The affair started at least 14 months ago. I have the credit card receipts from the hotel in Napa. She clicked off the recording and slipped the phone back into the small bag attached to her wheelchair. A waiter approached with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. "Champagne?" he offered. "Just water, thank you. I'm on medication." It wasn't entirely a lie. She was on medication, a nerve pain management protocol and physical therapy supplements. But she could have had 1 glass of champagne. She chose not to. She wanted to remember every detail of this night with perfect clarity. 3 years. That's how long it had been since the accident that had changed everything. Naomi's mind drifted back as she watched the celebration unfold. 3 years ago, she'd been at the peak of her career. Her 4th suspense novel, The Unraveling, had spent 16 weeks on the bestseller list. She'd been on a national book tour, giving interviews, signing hundreds of copies, basking in the success she'd worked so hard to achieve. Graham had been proud then, proud to introduce her as my wife, the best-selling author. He'd loved the attention, the glamorous parties, the way publishers and producers courted them both. Their marriage hadn't been perfect, but it had been functional. They'd understood each other's ambitions. Graham built his investment portfolio while Naomi built her fictional worlds. They'd maintained a beautiful home in Pacific Heights, attended the right charity events, cultivated the right friendships. It was a life of careful construction, each piece fitting into place like a well-plotted narrative. The night of the accident, she'd been driving home from a book event in Sacramento. November rain, the kind that turns California highways into slick, reflective surfaces. She remembered the podcast she'd been listening to, an interview with another thriller writer. She remembered thinking about the next book, mentally drafting a scene involving a car chase. Then she remembered headlights in a rearview mirror coming too fast, the impact, the spin, the sickening moment when her BMW left the road and rolled down an embankment. After that, fragments, the smell of deployed airbags, rain on her face through a shattered window, pain that seemed to originate from everywhere and nowhere. The helicopter ride to the trauma center. Graham's face, pale and terrified, when she finally woke up 3 days later. "You're alive," he'd said, gripping her hand so hard it hurt. "Jesus Christ, Naomi, you're alive." She'd tried to move her legs. Nothing happened. The doctors had used words like incomplete spinal injury and significant trauma to the lumbar region. They'd been cautiously optimistic about recovery. Some sensation remained, some motor function. With extensive physical therapy, she might regain significant mobility. Or she might not. It was too early to tell. Graham had been devoted in those early months. He'd attended every doctor's appointment, every physical therapy session. He'd hired the best specialists, renovated their home to make it wheelchair accessible, arranged for private caregivers. He'd held her when she cried, encouraged her when she wanted to give up, celebrated every tiny victory, the first time she could wiggle her toes, the first time she could stand with assistance, even if only for a few seconds. But somewhere around month 7, something had shifted. It started with small things. Graham staying late at the office more frequently. Phone calls he'd take in another room. A new distraction in his eyes when she talked about her day. Naomi had seen it happening and had, at first, convinced herself she was being paranoid. Trauma changed people. Maybe this was just their new normal, and she needed to adjust her expectations. Then she'd met Rosa. Rosa Delgado had been hired as Naomi's primary daytime caregiver about 8 months after the accident. She was 50-something, originally from El Salvador, with warm brown eyes and the kind of unflappable competence that came from raising 4 children largely on her own. She helped Naomi with exercises, medication schedules, daily tasks, and gradually, they developed a friendship built on honesty and mutual respect. "You know your husband is cheating on you," Rosa had said one afternoon, about 3 months into her employment. She'd said it matter-of-factly, while helping Naomi transfer from the wheelchair to the bed for a rest. Naomi had frozen mid-transfer. "Excuse me." "I'm sorry to be blunt," Rosa had continued, her voice kind but firm. "But I've been doing this work for 20 years. I've seen this pattern before. The late nights. The way he doesn't really look at you anymore. The expensive gifts that feel like guilt rather than love. You're a smart woman. You've noticed too." Naomi had wanted to be angry, but she'd felt only a strange sense of relief. Someone had said it out loud. She wasn't imagining things. "I have noticed," she'd admitted quietly. I didn't want to believe it." "Do you want me to help you find out for sure?" Rosa had asked. That's when Naomi had started paying attention, really paying attention, with the same investigative skills she used to plot her novels. She'd noticed the name that came up repeatedly in Graham's phone. Lena. Lena calling about the revised investment portfolio. Lena needing to discuss client presentations. Lena working late hours that coincidentally matched Graham's. She'd hired a private investigator. The photos had been conclusive and cliché. Graham and a striking younger woman entering a hotel together, kissing in his car, having intimate dinners at restaurants on the other side of the city where they thought they wouldn't be recognized. The woman's name was Lena Monteiro. She was 29, allegedly from a prominent Brazilian family, and had recently been hired as an assistant at Graham's investment firm. She was beautiful in that carefully maintained way, highlighted hair, perfect makeup, designer clothes that suggested family money, or at least expensive taste. Naomi had confronted Graham on a Tuesday evening. She'd waited until Rosa had left for the day. She'd positioned herself in the living room with the investigation folder on her lap and simply said, "We need to talk about Lena." She'd watched his face cycle through expressions, surprise, guilt, defensiveness, and finally, a kind of cold resignation. "How long have you known?" he'd asked, not bothering to deny it. "Long enough," Naomi had replied. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" That conversation had lasted 3 hours. Graham had tried several approaches, claiming the affair meant nothing, blaming the stress of Naomi's injury, suggesting they could work through it with counseling. But Naomi had seen through each attempt. The truth was simpler and crueler. Graham didn't want to be married to a disabled woman. He wanted his old life back, and Lena represented that possibility. "Do you love her?" Naomi had asked. Graham had hesitated, then nodded. "I think I do." "Then we should divorce," Naomi had said calmly. "But we're going to do this on my terms." She'd negotiated her exit with the same precision she used to plot her novels. She'd wanted the house, fully paid off and modified for her accessibility needs. She'd wanted a settlement that reflected her contributions to their marriage and her future medical needs. She'd wanted it done quickly and quietly, with minimal drama. Graham had agreed to almost everything. He'd seemed relieved, actually, that she wasn't fighting him. He didn't understand that Naomi had stopped fighting for their marriage the moment she'd seen the truth. She'd simply wanted a fair conclusion. The divorce had been finalized that very morning in a lawyer's office with uncomfortable chairs and terrible coffee. They'd signed the papers at 10 a.m. At 11:30 a.m., Rosa had brought in the mail, which included a cream-colored envelope with elegant calligraphy. "Mr. Graham Voss and Miss Lena Montero request the honor of your presence at their wedding." Naomi had stared at the invitation for a long moment, then started laughing. Rosa had looked concerned. "Are you okay?" she'd asked. "They're getting married," Naomi had said, still laughing. 1 week after the divorce is final. They already had this planned. The invitations were probably ordered months ago. Rosa had searched for the right word. Brazen. "That's arrogant," Naomi had corrected. "And stupid. You know what? I'm going to attend." "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Naomi had looked up at Rosa, and something in her expression must have been unsettling because Rosa had actually taken a step back. "I'm not going to make a scene," Naomi had said quietly. "I'm just going to watch. I want to see this. I want to understand who Graham is now, and who this woman is that he's chosen. I'm a writer, Rosa. I observe people. This is research." Now sitting in her wheelchair at the edge of the reception, Naomi continued her research. She watched Lena work the room with practiced charm, touching arms, laughing at jokes, making everyone feel special. She watched Graham beam with pride, his hand possessively on Lena's waist. She watched the performance of happiness. And she noticed things. She noticed how Lena's smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she talked to Graham's elderly mother. She noticed how Lena steered conversations away from her past, deflecting questions about her family with vague references to Sao Paulo and international boarding schools. She noticed how Graham's business partners seemed charmed, but also slightly uncertain around Lena, as if they couldn't quite figure her out. Naomi pulled out her phone again and made another recording. "Lena is performing wealth rather than inhabiting it. The designer dress is this season, but the shoes are 2 years old and have been resold. The jewelry is beautiful, but costume, not real. She name-drops exclusive places but gets small details wrong. She mentioned the view of the Seine from her apartment near the Louvre, but anyone who actually lived in that area would know the Seine isn't visible from there. She's constructed an identity, and she's good at it, but there are cracks." A familiar voice interrupted her observations. "Naomi, is that really you?" She looked up to see Margaret Chen, one of Graham's oldest friends and business partners. Margaret was staring at her with a mixture of shock and discomfort. "Hello, Margaret," Naomi said pleasantly. "Lovely wedding, isn't it?" Yes, but what are you doing here?" Margaret glanced nervously toward the wedding party. "Does Graham know you're here?" "I doubt it. I've been very discreet." Naomi smiled. "I'm just observing. It's a public event, technically. The hotel is open to guests. But your divorce was just—" Margaret stopped herself, clearly uncomfortable. "I mean, I heard it was recent." "This morning, actually," Naomi confirmed. "Signed the papers at 10. They were married at 4. Quite efficient, don't you think?" Margaret shifted her weight, torn between social obligation and obvious discomfort. "Naomi, I don't know what to say. This seems awkward, inappropriate, slightly unhinged." Naomi kept her tone light, even amused. "Perhaps, but I'm not here to cause problems, Margaret. I'm genuinely just curious. Tell me about Lena. You must have gotten to know her through Graham's work." Margaret glanced around again, then sat down in the chair next to Naomi's wheelchair. apparently deciding that conversation was better than leaving Naomi alone and potentially unpredictable. She's charming, Margaret said carefully. Very attentive to Graham. She seems to make him happy. But, Naomi prompted. But nothing. I didn't say, but you were thinking it. I can see it in your face. You're not entirely comfortable with her. Margaret sighed. Look, I don't know her well. She's been working at the firm for about a year. She's smart. She's beautiful. She's good with clients. Graham is clearly smitten, but there's something that doesn't quite add up, Naomi suggested. I shouldn't be having this conversation with you, Margaret said, standing up. Especially not here, not tonight. I'm sorry about everything, Naomi. I really am. The accident, the divorce, all of it. But this, you being here, this isn't healthy. Probably not, Naomi agreed, but I'm doing it anyway. Enjoy the rest of the reception, Margaret. As Margaret walked away, Naomi saw her approach Graham and whisper something in his ear. Graham's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the room. When his gaze landed on Naomi, his face went through a rapid sequence of emotions. Shock, anger, confusion, and finally something that might have been shame. He started walking toward her, Lena's hand on his arm, her expression curious. Here we go, Naomi murmured to herself. Graham stopped a few feet from her wheelchair. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. Stress, probably. Or guilt. Or both. Naomi, he said, his voice tight and controlled. What are you doing here? Attending a wedding, she replied calmly. The hotel is open to the public. I'm not causing any disturbance. Lena stepped forward, her smile perfectly calibrated to show concern rather than hostility. You must be Naomi. I've heard so much about you. Graham has told me about your accident and your recovery. I'm so sorry for what you've been through. The pity in Lena's voice was perfectly pitched, but Naomi caught the calculation beneath it. This was a woman who knew exactly how to manage a situation. Thank you, Naomi said, and congratulations on your marriage. That's a beautiful dress. Vera Wang? Yes. Lena seemed pleased that Naomi had recognized the designer. From the new collection. I fell in love with it the moment I saw it. It suits you, Naomi said. And then, because she couldn't help herself. Though I imagine it's difficult to plan a wedding on such short notice. You must have been very organized. Lena's smile flickered for just a moment. We didn't want to wait. When you know it's right, why delay? Why indeed, Naomi agreed. She looked at Graham. I'm not here to cause a scene, Graham. I promise. I just wanted to see this for myself. Call it closure. This is extremely inappropriate, Graham said, his voice low and angry. We're trying to celebrate our marriage, and you show up like some kind of ghost. Graham, Lena interrupted gently, placing a hand on his arm. It's fine. I understand. This must be difficult for Naomi. If she needs to be here to process things, we can be compassionate about that. The condescension in Lena's compassion was masterful. Naomi almost admired it. You're very understanding, Naomi said. I can see why Graham fell in love with you. You're much easier than I was, I imagine. I had a tendency to ask difficult questions and expect honest answers. That must have been exhausting. Graham's face flushed red. Naomi, I'm leaving, Naomi said, backing her wheelchair up slightly. I've seen what I needed to see. Enjoy your honeymoon. Where are you going, by the way? Let me guess. Bali? The Maldives? Somewhere appropriately romantic and photogenic? The Amalfi Coast, Lena said, still smiling that practiced smile. We leave tomorrow. Lovely. I've always wanted to go there. Maybe I'll write a book set in Italy, a thriller about beautiful places and the secrets people hide in them. Naomi turned her wheelchair toward the exit, then paused. Oh, and Lena, your accent is fascinating. It seems to shift between Portuguese and something else I can't quite place. What part of Brazil did you say you were from? For the first time, Lena's composure cracked just slightly. Sao Paulo. I spent time in several countries growing up. International schools. Of course, Naomi said. Well, congratulations again. I wish you both exactly what you deserve. She wheeled herself toward the exit, aware of Graham and Lena watching her, aware of the whispers starting to ripple through nearby guests who had witnessed the exchange. Let them talk. She'd gotten what she'd come for, confirmation that her instincts were correct. There was something off about Lina Montero, something constructed and false beneath the beautiful surface. In the hotel parking lot, Rosa was waiting in the van, reading a book with the overhead light on. "How did it go?" Rosa asked as she helped Naomi into the passenger seat and loaded the wheelchair into the back. "Exactly as expected," Naomi said. "They were surprised to see me." Graham was angry. Lina was perfectly, calculatedly gracious, and I'm now certain that Lina is not who she claims to be. "What makes you so sure?" "A million little things that don't add up. A writer's instinct, and the way she reacted when I mentioned her accent." Naomi clicked her seatbelt into place. "Rosa, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to help me find out who Lina Montero really is." Rosa pulled out of the parking lot, her hands steady on the wheel. "Why do I get the feeling you're already planning your next book?" "Because I am," Naomi said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "I'm going to write the most realistic thriller of my career. And this time I won't have to invent the villain. She's already written herself into existence. I'm just going to expose the plot." As they drove through the San Francisco night, Naomi pulled out her phone and created a new voice memo. She titled it The Replacement and began to speak. Chapter 1. The wedding was everything she'd ever wanted. The dress, the venue, the wealthy husband who looked at her like she'd hung the moon. But in the corner, watching from the shadows, sat the woman she'd replaced. The woman who knew that beneath the perfect surface, beneath the beautiful lies, there was something much darker waiting to be discovered. The woman who had nothing left to lose and all the time in the world to uncover the truth. Naomi clicked off the recording and stared out at the city lights. For the first time since the accident, she felt something like excitement. Not happiness exactly, but purpose. She'd spent 3 years feeling like a victim of the crash, of her injury, of Graham's betrayal. But sitting in that hotel, watching Lina perform her carefully constructed life, Naomi had remembered something essential about herself. She wasn't a victim. She was a storyteller. And every good story needed a villain who got what was coming to them. She just had to figure out who Lina Montero really was, and why a woman who claimed to be from old Brazilian money needed to marry Graham Voss so desperately that she'd orchestrated a wedding exactly 1 week after his divorce was final. The investigation was already forming in her mind, plotted like one of her novels. First, she'd need to research Lina's background, verify the details of her supposed family history, education, previous employment. Then she'd need to understand the timeline. When had Lina really entered Graham's life, and what had she wanted from him? Finally, she'd need to follow the pattern, because women like Lina, women who constructed elaborate false identities, they always followed patterns. "Rosa," Naomi said as they pulled into her driveway, "tomorrow, can you help me with some internet research? I want to find out everything available about Lina Montero, or anyone who might have used that name." Rosa put the van in park and turned to look at Naomi. "Are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes the best revenge is just moving on." "I'm not interested in revenge," Naomi said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. "I'm interested in the truth, and I'm interested in protecting Graham from something he's too blinded by infatuation to see." "You still care about him." "I care about the truth," Naomi corrected. "Graham made his choices. But if Lina is who I think she is, she's not just a woman who fell in love with a married man. She's something much more dangerous. And I'm the only one who's paying attention." That night, lying in bed, Naomi couldn't sleep. Her mind was racing with possibilities, with plot threads, with the instinctive sense that she'd stumbled onto something bigger than a simple affair. She picked up her tablet and began searching for information on Lina Montero. The digital footprint was surprisingly thin for someone who claimed to come from a prominent family. A LinkedIn profile showed employment at Graham's firm beginning 14 months ago, with previous work listed at an international consulting company that, when Naomi searched for it, seemed to have very little online presence. Social media accounts were recent. Instagram started just over a year ago, filled with carefully curated photos of San Francisco life, designer purchases, and posed shots with Graham. But there were no childhood photos, no family pictures, no friends from Sao Paulo commenting on posts, no digital history that extended back more than 18 months. It was as if Lina Montero had simply materialized into existence fully formed, like a character written into being. Naomi created a new document on her tablet and titled it Research Notes, The Replacement. She began listing everything she knew, everything she'd observed, everything that didn't quite fit. By the time she finally fell asleep at 3 a.m., she had 5 pages of notes and a growing certainty that she'd found her next story. She just didn't know yet how dark that story would become, or how many lives had already been touched by the woman who called herself Lena Montero. In her dreams, she was back at the wedding, but this time when she looked at Lena's face, it kept shifting and changing, becoming different people, different identities, like a movie where the same actress played multiple roles. And in each face, there was the same smile, beautiful, calculated, and utterly without warmth. The morning after the wedding, Naomi woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows and the smell of fresh coffee drifting up from the kitchen. She could hear Rosa moving around downstairs, probably preparing breakfast and organizing the day's medications. For a moment, Naomi lay still, staring at the ceiling, her mind already churning through the research plan she'd outlined in the early morning hours. She transferred herself into the wheelchair with the practiced efficiency of 3 years' experience, though her lower back protested with sharp stabs of nerve pain. Some days were better than others. Today wasn't one of the better ones, but she pushed through anyway. Pain was just background noise now, something she'd learned to work around rather than surrender to. By the time she made it downstairs, Rosa had set up her laptop at the kitchen table alongside a plate of scrambled eggs and whole wheat toast. "You look terrible," Rosa said bluntly, pouring coffee into Naomi's favorite mug. "What time did you finally go to sleep?" 3, maybe? I started researching. Naomi took the coffee gratefully, inhaling the steam. "Rosa, I need your help today. Real help, not just the caregiving stuff. I need a research partner." Rosa sat down across from her, her expression serious. "What exactly are we researching?" "Lena Montero, or whoever she really is." Naomi pulled up the document she'd started the night before. "Look at this. Her digital footprint barely goes back 18 months. No childhood photos, no family connections, no friends from her supposed past. Everything about her online presence feels manufactured." Rosa leaned in, studying the screen. "Lots of people don't post their whole lives online, especially if they come from money. Privacy is a luxury." "True. But there are always traces. Tagged photos from friends, mentions in society pages if the family is really prominent, something. Lena has nothing. It's like she was born fully formed at age 28. Naomi clicked through several searches she'd saved. "And look at this. The consulting company she listed as her previous employer? It has a website, but it's bare bones. No employee directory, no project descriptions, just generic corporate language. When I tried to find news articles or client testimonials, nothing came up. Could be a private company that doesn't advertise. Could be. Or could be a front created to give her work history some legitimacy." Naomi took a bite of eggs, barely tasting them. "I want to try something. You said when you first saw Lena, something about her seemed familiar. Can you try to remember where you might have seen her before?" Rosa's face clouded with concentration. "I've been thinking about that. It wasn't her face exactly, more like the way she moved, the way she presented herself. I've worked with a lot of wealthy families over the years, and there's a difference between people who grew up with money and people who learned to act like they did." "What kind of difference?" "People born into wealth don't perform it the same way. They're comfortable, almost casual about expensive things. People who acquired wealth later, or people pretending to have it, they're more careful. Everything is deliberate, the way they hold a wine glass, the designer labels they choose, the stories they tell. They're always conscious of the performance." Naomi nodded slowly. "Lena touched her necklace constantly last night. A nervous gesture that she tried to make look elegant, but it drew attention to the jewelry. Like she wanted people to notice it." "Exactly. And there was something else." Rosa stood up, pacing to the window. "Maybe 10, 12 years ago, I worked for a family in Presidio Heights, the Caldwells. Very wealthy, old San Francisco money. They had a daughter, Christina, who was troubled. Drug problems, mainly. She fell in with some bad people, and one of them was a woman who convinced Christina to give her access to the family accounts. By the time the Caldwells figured out what was happening, this woman had transferred almost $200,000 and disappeared. Did they catch her? No. But I remember Mrs. Caldwell showing me a photo once, asking if I'd seen anyone matching the description around the neighborhood. The woman had dark hair, late 20s, very beautiful. She told Christina her name was Elena Montenegro. Said she was from a wealthy Argentine family who'd cut her off, needed help getting back on her feet. It was all lies. Naomi's pulse quickened. Elena Montenegro, Lena Montero. Those names are very similar. I thought the same thing last night when I saw her, but it's been over a decade and I only saw that photo once. I can't be certain. Do you remember anything else about the case? Did the Caldwells file a police report? Rosa thought for a moment. I think so, but nothing came of it. The woman had disappeared completely. Mrs. Caldwell died about 5 years ago, and Mr. Caldwell moved to a care facility. I don't know what happened to Christina. Naomi was already typing furiously on her laptop. If there was a police report, it would be on record. And if this is the same woman, she has a pattern. Find a vulnerable target, gain their trust, take what she can, and disappear before anyone catches on. But Graham isn't vulnerable, Rosa pointed out. He's successful, connected, not some troubled young woman struggling with addiction. No, but he was vulnerable in a different way. He had a wife who'd been in a serious accident, whose recovery was uncertain, whose needs were demanding. He was looking for an escape, and Lena provided one. She also provided legitimacy, working at his firm, being seen as a professional peer rather than just an affair, and now she's married to him, which gives her legal access to his assets. Rosa sat back down, her expression troubled. If you're right, we need to warn him. He won't listen to me. Not now, maybe not ever. He's convinced I'm the bitter ex-wife who can't let go. Naomi saved her document and opened a new browser window. But I can find proof. I can track down the Caldwell case, see if there are other similar incidents, build a timeline, and then I can write it all down in a way that makes the pattern impossible to ignore. You're going to write a book about this. I'm going to write the book about this. A thriller based on a woman who reinvents herself, preys on vulnerable people, and stays one step ahead of consequences. It'll be fiction, technically, but anyone who knows Graham and Lena will recognize the parallels. Rosa looked uncertain. That sounds like it could get you sued for defamation. Only if it's not true, and only if I don't disguise it enough. Naomi's smile was sharp. I've been writing thrillers for 15 years, Rosa. I know how to tell a true story in a way that's legally protected as fiction. Besides, if Lena really is a con artist, the last thing she'll want is more attention drawn to herself. For the next several hours, they worked together in the kind of focused partnership that Naomi hadn't experienced since before the accident. Rosa used her phone to reach out to old contacts from her years of caregiving work, asking discreet questions about the Caldwell family and the theft that had happened over a decade ago. Naomi dove into public records databases, searching for police reports, court filings, anything that might connect to Elena Montenegro or similar names. By early afternoon, they'd found their first solid lead, a police report from 12 years ago filed by Richard Caldwell on behalf of his daughter Christina, reporting theft by deception. The suspect's name was listed as Elena Cristina Montenegro, age 26 at the time, physical description matching someone who could easily be Lena Montero. The report noted that the suspect had fled the jurisdiction and could not be located for questioning. This is her, Naomi said, staring at the screen, or at least this is one of her identities. The timeline works. She would have been 17 or 18 when this happened. If she's been doing this for over a decade, there are probably other victims. Rosa leaned over her shoulder. How do we find them? We search for patterns, similar names, similar methods, similar targets. Women or men who are wealthy but vulnerable in some way, isolated, struggling, in transition. And we look for financial crimes that went unsolved because the perpetrator disappeared. They spent the rest of the afternoon building a search strategy. Naomi contacted a private investigator she'd used for research on previous books, a woman named Diane Torres, who specialized in tracking down information that wasn't readily available through public channels. She explained what she was looking for, carefully framing it as research for a novel rather than a personal vendetta. I'll see what I can find, Diane said over the phone, her voice crackling slightly through the connection. But if this person has been operating under multiple identities for over a decade, it's going to take time. People like that are good at covering their tracks. I have time, Naomi replied, and I have motivation. After she hung up, Rosa brought her a fresh cup of coffee and a concerned look. You should eat something. You've been staring at that screen for hours. I'm not hungry. You need to take care of yourself, Naomi. This obsession, it's not obsession, Naomi interrupted, though she knew that wasn't entirely true. It's investigation. It's what I do. I build narratives, I connect dots, I find patterns in chaos. This is just another story, except this time it's real. Rosa was quiet for a moment, then said, "What are you really hoping to accomplish here? Even if you prove that Lena is a con artist, even if you write a book that exposes her, Graham made his choice. He chose her over you. Will any of this change that?" The question hit harder than Naomi wanted to admit. She sat back in her wheelchair, her hands falling away from the keyboard. "No," she said finally. "It won't change what Graham did. But maybe it'll stop her from doing it to someone else. And maybe it'll help me make sense of what happened. Why my marriage fell apart. Why he was so quick to find someone else. Why I wasn't enough." "You were always enough," Rosa said firmly. "The accident didn't change your worth as a person. Tell that to Graham. Graham is a coward who couldn't handle the reality of your injury. That's his failing, not yours. But Naomi, you can't heal from his betrayal by destroying the woman he left you for. That's not how healing works." "Then how does it work?" Naomi heard the frustration in her own voice, the anger she'd been pushing down for months. "Because I've tried moving on. I've tried focusing on my recovery. I've tried accepting that my life is different now, and that's just how things are. But every time I start to feel okay, I remember that he's out there with her, living the life we were supposed to have, and she's not even who she claims to be. If I can't have justice for what happened to me, at least I can make sure the truth comes out about who she really is." Rosa didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was gentler. "Then let's find the truth. But promise me you'll be careful. If this woman really is dangerous, if she spent years getting away with fraud and deception, she's not going to take kindly to someone exposing her." "I'll be careful," Naomi promised. Though even as she said it, she knew that careful wasn't really in her nature anymore. Careful was what she'd been before the accident, measured, controlled, playing by the rules. Now she felt like she had nothing left to lose and no reason to hold back. Over the next 3 weeks, a picture began to emerge. Diane Torres came through with information that connected several cases of financial fraud to women using variations of similar names: Elena Montenegro, Lena Montero, Cristina Monteiro. The methods were consistent: gain access to wealthy but vulnerable individuals, establish trust, extract money or assets, disappear before consequences caught up. The victims ranged from an elderly widower in Seattle to a recently divorced businessman in Los Angeles, to a young heiress in Vancouver struggling with mental health issues. In each case, the woman had been beautiful, charming, and had claimed to come from wealthy international families that were difficult to verify. In each case, she'd vanished before authorities could build a solid case. And in each case, the physical descriptions matched someone who could easily be the woman now calling herself Lena Montero. Naomi compiled everything into a detailed timeline, cross-referencing dates and locations. There were gaps, years when the trail went cold, when presumably the woman had either been working under a completely different identity or had temporarily stopped her activities, but the overall pattern was unmistakable. "She's not just a woman who had an affair with my husband," Naomi said to Rosa one evening as they reviewed the evidence. "She's a professional. This is what she does. She finds targets, constructs whatever identity will appeal to them, takes what she can and moves on." "But she married Graham," Rosa pointed out. "That's different from the other cases. She's not just taking money and running, she's committed to a long-term role." Naomi had thought about this extensively. Maybe Graham represents something different, a level of wealth and social standing that's worth maintaining. Or maybe she's evolving, getting smarter. A marriage gives her legal protection, legitimate access to assets, and if Graham ever tries to leave her, she'll be entitled to a substantial settlement. It's a longer game, but potentially more profitable. Or maybe she actually loves him. People like Lena don't love. They perform love. There's a difference. As the research progressed, Naomi started writing. Not the formal manuscript yet, but detailed character sketches, scene outlines, dialogue experiments. She wrote about a woman called Miranda who could become anyone she needed to be, who studied her targets like an actor studying a role, who felt nothing but the satisfaction of a successful performance. She wrote about the people Miranda destroyed, not physically but emotionally and financially, leaving them hollowed out and questioning their own judgment. And she wrote about a protagonist, a woman in a wheelchair who'd lost everything but discovered she still had the one weapon that couldn't be taken away: her ability to tell stories, to expose truth through fiction, to make readers see what she'd seen. The writing consumed her in a way nothing had since before the accident. She worked late into the night, often until Rosa had to physically take the laptop away and insist she rest. She filled notebook after notebook with observations, theories, snippets of dialogue, emotional beats. The book was becoming real, taking shape, finding its voice. One afternoon, about a month after the wedding, Naomi received an unexpected phone call from Margaret Chen. "Naomi, I hope I'm not overstepping," Margaret said, her voice uncertain. "But I wanted to check in on you. After seeing you at the wedding, I've been thinking—" "About what?" Naomi asked, putting her laptop aside. "About Graham and Lena. About some things that have been bothering me." There was a long pause. "Can we meet for coffee? There are some things I'd like to discuss, but not over the phone." They met at a quiet cafe in Noe Valley the next day. Margaret arrived looking strained, her usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. "For meeting me," Margaret said. "I wasn't for meeting me," Margaret said. "I wasn't sure you would." "I'm curious," Naomi admitted. "You were pretty clear at the wedding that you thought I shouldn't be there." "I know, and I'm sorry about that. I was uncomfortable with the situation, and I handled it badly." Margaret wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "But since then I've been paying more attention to Lena, to Graham, to some irregularities at the firm." Naomi's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. "What kind of irregularities?" "Financial discrepancies. Nothing huge and nothing I can prove is deliberate, but enough to make me uncomfortable. Client accounts that show transfers I don't remember authorizing. Investment decisions that don't match our usual protocols. Paperwork that seems to have been backdated." Margaret leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Lena has access to a lot of sensitive information at the firm. She's Graham's assistant, which means she handles his accounts, his files, his communications with clients. I've started to wonder if that access is being misused." "Have you talked to Graham about this?" "I tried. He got defensive immediately, said I was being paranoid, suggested I was uncomfortable with his marriage, and was looking for problems that didn't exist. If I told you that Lena might not be who she claims to be, that there's evidence she's used other identities, been involved in financial fraud before, targeted vulnerable people for theft?" Margaret's face went pale. "Do you have proof?" "I have police reports, victim statements, patterns that are too consistent to be coincidence. I've been researching her for weeks now. I can show you everything I've found." "Why?" Margaret asked. "Why are you doing this? Is it revenge because Graham left you?" "Maybe partly," Naomi admitted. "I won't lie and say there's no personal motivation. But Margaret, if I'm right, Lena is dangerous. Not just to Graham, but to his clients, to his business partners, to anyone who trusts her. She's a professional con artist, and she's been doing this for over a decade. Graham is just her latest target, and probably her most ambitious one." Margaret was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, she said, "Show me what you've found." They spent the next 2 hours going through Naomi's research. Naomi had brought her laptop and printed copies of the most relevant documents: police reports, news articles about unsolved financial crimes, photographs from social media accounts that seemed to show the same woman under different names. With each piece of evidence, Margaret's expression grew more troubled. "This is the same person," Margaret said, staring at a photo from 8 years ago of a woman calling herself Elena Christina, who'd been suspected of defrauding an elderly man in Portland. "The features are identical to Lena. The age progression matches. How is she getting away with this?" "Because she's smart enough to never take so much that it warrants a major investigation, and she moves before anyone can build a solid case," Naomi explained. "She chooses victims who are either too embarrassed to report what happened or too damaged to pursue justice effectively. And she's good at reading people, at becoming exactly what they need her to be." "Graham needed an escape from your situation," Margaret said quietly. "No offense." "None taken. It's true. I became a burden he didn't want to carry, and she offered him a way out that felt exciting and validating." Naomi closed the laptop. "But here's what I think happened. I think Lena targeted Graham deliberately. She researched him, learned about our marriage and my accident, got herself hired at his firm, and positioned herself perfectly to be his escape route. She knew exactly what she was doing. Margaret rubbed her temples. If this is true, if Graham is being manipulated this completely, we have to tell him. We have to warn him. He won't believe it coming from me. He'll think I'm trying to sabotage his happiness out of jealousy. Then it has to come from me. Or from someone else he trusts. We need to, Wait, Naomi interrupted. If you confront him now, Lena will know someone's investigating her. She'll either convince Graham it's all lies and turn him completely against anyone questioning her, or she'll cut her losses and disappear before we can prove anything definitive. Either way, we lose our chance to really stop her. Then what do you suggest? Naomi had been thinking about this for weeks, turning it over in her mind. I'm writing a book, a thriller about a con artist who reinvents herself, who preys on vulnerable people, who always stays one step ahead. It'll be fiction, but it'll be detailed and specific enough that anyone who knows the real story will recognize it. When it's published, when it becomes a bestseller, and it will, because I know how to write a compelling narrative, the scrutiny will be enormous. Journalists will investigate, readers will connect the dots, and Lena won't be able to hide anymore. That could take months, Margaret protested. A year or more. How much damage could she do in that time? Less than you think. Graham has good lawyers who structured his premarital assets carefully, and I made sure the divorce settlement protected my interests. Lena has access, but not unlimited access. And if you're watching the firm accounts, if you're documenting the irregularities, we'll have evidence to support everything when the time comes. Margaret looked torn, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of waiting while potentially criminal activity continued, but she also seemed to understand the logic of Naomi's approach. I'll watch the accounts, she finally agreed. I'll document everything suspicious. But Naomi, if I see evidence of serious theft, of real harm being done to clients, I'm going to have to act immediately. I have fiduciary responsibilities. I understand. Just be smart about it. Lena is dangerous, and she survived this long by being smarter than the people chasing her. After Margaret left, Naomi sat in the cafe for a long time, her coffee growing cold, her mind racing through the implications of their conversation. She'd just recruited an ally, someone with inside access to Graham's business and the motivation to help expose Lena, but she'd also committed herself to a course of action that felt both calculated and risky. She pulled out her phone and opened the voice memo app. Chapter 12, she said quietly. Miranda's pattern is unraveling. The people she's manipulated are starting to compare notes, to see the connections she thought she'd hidden. She doesn't know it yet, but the walls are closing in. And the woman she most underestimated, the one she dismissed as broken and irrelevant, is the one building the case that will destroy her. That evening, Naomi worked on the manuscript with renewed focus. The book was taking shape faster than anything she'd written before, driven by the urgency of real stakes and real people. Her protagonist, a novelist named Claire, who'd been paralyzed in an accident and then betrayed by her husband, was discovering that her supposed replacement was actually a con artist with a long history of fraud. The plot paralleled reality closely enough to be recognizable but diverged enough to provide legal protection. And the character of Miranda, beautiful, charming, utterly without conscience, was becoming one of the most compelling villains Naomi had ever created. She wrote Miranda with a mixture of fascination and revulsion, understanding that what made her dangerous was her ability to genuinely inhabit whatever role she chose, to believe her own lies so completely that others couldn't help but believe them too. Around midnight, Rosa knocked on Naomi's door, carrying a cup of herbal tea. "You need to sleep," Rosa said, setting the tea down on the desk. "You've been at this for 16 hours straight." "I'm on a roll." The words are flowing. "Oh, the words will still be there tomorrow. Your health won't be if you keep pushing yourself like this." Rosa's tone was gentle but firm. "What good is exposing Lena if you destroy yourself in the process?" Naomi saved her document and closed the laptop with reluctant acceptance. "You're right. I just feel like I'm finally doing something that matters. Like all the pain and betrayal and struggle is being channeled into something productive." "It is. But you're allowed to rest too. You're allowed to have a life that isn't entirely consumed by this investigation." "What life?" Naomi asked, more bitterly than she'd intended. My career stalled after the accident. My marriage ended. My friends drifted away because I wasn't fun anymore, because I couldn't do the things we used to do. This book is all I have." Rosa sat down on the edge of the bed, her expression sad. "That's not true, and you know it. You have your talent, your intelligence, your strength. You have people who care about you, me, your agent, your editor, readers who've been waiting for your next book. You have a future that doesn't have to be defined by what Graham did or didn't do." "I know," Naomi said quietly. "I know you're right, but sometimes it's hard to see past the anger. Then let the anger fuel the work, but don't let it consume you. Write the book. Expose the truth. But remember that when this is over, you still have to live with yourself and the choices you've made." After Rosa left, Naomi lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about choices and consequences. She'd made the choice to investigate Lena, to write this book, to potentially destroy the life Graham had built with his new wife. She told herself it was about justice, about protecting future victims, about exposing the truth. But Rosa's question echoed in her mind. What are you really hoping to accomplish? The honest answer was complicated. Yes, she wanted justice. Yes, she wanted to stop Lena from hurting others. But she also wanted Graham to see what he'd given up, to recognize the mistake he'd made, to understand that the woman he'd chosen over his wife was a lie. She wanted vindication, wanted proof that the failure of their marriage wasn't about her inadequacy, but about his weakness and Lena's manipulation. Was that revenge? Maybe. But it was also truth. And truth, Naomi had always believed, was worth pursuing even when the pursuit was painful. She picked up her phone one more time and recorded a final thought for the day. The thing about con artists is that they rely on people's desire to believe. They offer us the version of reality we wish was true, the charming stranger who truly understands us, the opportunity that's too good to pass up, the love that feels destined. We want to believe so badly that we ignore the red flags, dismiss the inconsistencies, silence our own doubts. Miranda's greatest weapon isn't her beauty or her lies. It's our willingness to be fooled. And the only way to defeat her is to stop wanting the illusion to be real. 6 weeks after the wedding, Naomi's manuscript had grown to over 300 pages. The story had taken on a life of its own, flowing from her faster than anything she'd written before. Each morning she woke with new scenes already forming in her mind, dialogue that felt so real she could hear the characters speaking. Rosa had started calling it the Obsession Project, but even she had to admit the writing was extraordinary. "I read the pages you left on the printer," Rosa said one morning, setting down a breakfast tray. "The confrontation scene between Claire and Miranda is devastating. I actually got chills." Naomi looked up from her laptop, surprised. "You're reading it?" "Of course I'm reading it. You're living this story 20 hours a day. I want to understand what's driving you." Rosa poured orange juice into a glass. "That scene where Miranda tells Claire that being pitied is worse than being hated. That came from somewhere real, didn't it?" "Everything in the book comes from somewhere real," Naomi admitted. "That's what makes it dangerous." The manuscript had become more than just a fictionalized account of Lena's pattern. It had evolved into something rawer, more personal. Claire's journey through betrayal and disability mirrored Naomi's own so closely that sometimes she forgot where fiction ended and memoir began. She wrote about the humiliation of needing help with basic tasks, the grief of watching a marriage dissolve, the rage of being replaced by someone younger and undamaged. And she wrote about the cold satisfaction of investigation, of piecing together evidence, of building a case that would expose everything. Margaret Chen had become an invaluable source. Every few days, she'd email Naomi encrypted files containing documentation of irregularities at Graham's firm. Client accounts showed unexplained transfers. Investment portfolios had been restructured without proper authorization. Paperwork bore signatures that looked slightly off, as if someone had practiced forging them. Nothing was dramatic enough to trigger immediate alarm, but the pattern was clear to anyone paying attention. "She's skimming," Margaret had explained during their most recent meeting. "Small amounts from multiple accounts, moving money in ways that look legitimate on the surface but don't hold up under scrutiny. I estimate she's taken about $300,000 over the past year." "That's not small," Naomi had replied. "It is when you're dealing with accounts worth millions. Most clients will never notice. The ones who might are elderly or dealing with their own crises, exactly the kind of vulnerable targets you said she prefers." Margaret had looked exhausted. the stress of maintaining her professional demeanor while conducting a secret investigation clearly taking its toll. I've documented everything, but I don't know what to do with it. If I go to the authorities without concrete proof, Lena will claim I'm making false accusations. Graham will defend her and I'll look like I'm causing trouble. Keep documenting, Naomi had advised. When the book comes out, when the public scrutiny intensifies, that documentation will be crucial. People will take the allegations seriously when they're backed by a pattern of evidence. Now, typing furiously at her kitchen table, Naomi wove those financial details into her narrative. Miranda's character was becoming more sophisticated with each chapter, her methods more clearly defined. She was a woman who understood that greed needed to be tempered with patience, that the best cons were the ones where the victims didn't realize they'd been victimized until it was too late. The phone rang, interrupting Naomi's focus. Her agent's name flashed on the screen. "Naomi, please tell me you have pages for me," Christine Yang said without preamble. "Your publisher is getting anxious. It's been 3 years since your last book." "I have pages," Naomi confirmed. "Almost 400 of them." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. 400 pages in 6 weeks? "Naomi, are you okay?" "I'm better than okay. I'm writing the best book of my career." Naomi saved her document and leaned back in her wheelchair. It's a psychological thriller about a con artist who reinvents herself to prey on vulnerable people. The protagonist is a novelist who's been paralyzed in an accident and discovers her husband's new wife isn't who she claims to be. Another pause. "That's quite close to your personal situation." "It's fiction, Christine. Everything is fictionalized. Names are changed. Circumstances are different enough to provide legal protection. But yes, it's inspired by real events. That's what makes it compelling. It also makes it potentially litigious. Naomi, if this is a revenge project disguised as a novel, it's not revenge. It's truth disguised as fiction. There's a difference." Naomi heard the defensiveness in her own voice and tried to soften it. "Look, I know how this sounds, but I've done my research. The pattern I'm describing is real, documented, verifiable. I have police reports, victim statements, financial records. If anyone challenges the book, I can back up every element of the story." Christine sighed. "Send me what you have. I'll read it this weekend and we'll talk on Monday. But Naomi, as your agent and your friend, I need to say this. Make sure you're writing this book for the right reasons. Make sure it's about the story you need to tell, not just about hurting the people who hurt you." After she hung up, Naomi sat staring at her laptop screen. Was she writing this for the right reasons? Did it matter as long as the story was true and the writing was good? She'd built her career on creating compelling narratives about flawed people making desperate choices. This was just the first time the flawed, desperate person at the center of the story was her. That afternoon, Rosa helped her with physical therapy exercises, stretching and strengthening routines that Naomi had been neglecting in her writing frenzy. The nerve pain had been worse lately, sharp electric shocks that radiated down her legs at unpredictable intervals. "You're not taking care of yourself," Rosa said, guiding Naomi through a hip flexor stretch. "When was the last time you did a full PT session?" "I don't know, last week sometime." 9 days ago. I checked your chart." Rosa's hands were firm but gentle, supporting Naomi's leg as she held the stretch. "The writing is important, I understand that. But your health has to come first. You can't finish the book if you end up in the hospital with a pressure sore or a muscle contracture." "I'll be more careful," Naomi promised, though they both knew it was a lie. The book had become everything, consuming her attention in a way that felt necessary and urgent. Every hour spent on physical therapy or rest was an hour she could have spent writing, investigating, building her case. Later that evening, Naomi received an unexpected email from someone named Dr. Patricia Wellstone, subject line reading, "Regarding your research into Elena Montenegro." Her pulse quickened as she opened it. The email was brief and professional. Dr. Wellstone identified herself as a forensic psychologist who'd consulted on a fraud case in Seattle 8 years ago involving a woman matching Lena's description. She'd seen Naomi's name in connection with research requests about Elena Montenegro and wanted to share her professional assessment of the suspect in that case. "The woman I evaluated demonstrated textbook characteristics of what's sometimes called acquired psychopathy or sociopathic personality disorder," Dr. Wellstone had written. She was highly intelligent, extremely charming, and showed absolutely no genuine emotional connection to her victim. Everything was performance. She could cry on command, express remorse convincingly, even pass certain physiological tests designed to detect deception because she genuinely believed her own lies in the moment she was telling them. This made her extraordinarily dangerous and difficult to prosecute. The email continued with clinical details about the manipulation techniques the woman had used, her ability to read and mirror people's emotional needs, her complete lack of empathy beneath the charming exterior. Dr. Wellstone concluded by offering to speak with Naomi further if she was researching a book on the subject. Naomi immediately called the number in the email signature. Dr. Wellstone answered on the second ring, her voice warm and professional. Ms. Reyes, thank you for calling. I've actually been following your career. I'm a fan of your psychological thrillers. Thank you, Naomi said. Your email, the case you consulted on in Seattle. Can you tell me more about it? Legally, I'm limited in what I can share about confidential evaluations, but I can speak generally about the pattern of behavior I observed. Papers rustled in the background. The suspect in that case had befriended a 78-year-old widower, convinced him she was the granddaughter of a family friend from his past, gained access to his finances, and systematically drained his accounts over a period of about 6 months. By the time his actual family intervened, she'd taken nearly $500,000. Was she prosecuted? No, she disappeared before we could bring charges. The victim was too embarrassed to pursue the case aggressively, and without her testimony, we had insufficient evidence. Dr. Wellstone paused. May I ask why you're researching this particular person? Naomi made a decision to trust her instinct about this woman. Because I think she's now married to my ex-husband under a different name. I think she targeted him deliberately while he was vulnerable, and I think she's currently defrauding his business clients. I'm writing a book about it. I see. Dr. Wellstone's tone shifted, becoming more serious. Miss Reyes, if you're right, you need to be very careful. People with this psychological profile can be extremely vindictive when they feel threatened. They don't experience guilt or remorse the way most people do, which means they're capable of escalating to dangerous behavior without the normal psychological barriers that would stop someone else. Are you saying she could be violent? I'm saying that if she perceives you as a threat to her current situation, she'll do whatever she believes is necessary to neutralize that threat. That could mean anything from a smear campaign to legal action to, yes, potentially physical harm. These individuals view other people as obstacles or tools, not as human beings with intrinsic worth. After the call ended, Naomi sat in the darkening kitchen, absorbing the implications of what Dr. Wellstone had told her. She'd been thinking of Lena as a clever criminal, someone who used charm and deception to steal money. She hadn't fully considered the possibility that Lena might be genuinely dangerous in other ways. You're thinking too loud, Rosa said from the doorway. I can hear the wheels turning from the living room. Naomi turned her wheelchair to face her. If someone is truly incapable of empathy, truly doesn't see other people as real, what are they capable of? Why are you asking that? Because I just talked to a psychologist who evaluated someone I think is Lena, and she basically said this woman has no conscience, that she's dangerous. Rosa came into the kitchen and turned on the lights, dispelling the shadows. Then maybe it's time to stop investigating and go to the police with what you have. We've been through this. What I have isn't enough for criminal charges. It's enough for a book, enough to expose her publicly, but not enough for prosecution. Naomi rubbed her temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. The book is the weapon. Once it's published, once people start connecting the dots, the authorities will have to take it seriously. And what happens when Lena figures out you're the one exposing her? What happens when the book comes out and she recognizes herself in every page? Rosa's voice was sharp with worry. You're not exactly in a position to defend yourself physically if she decides to retaliate. The truth of that statement hit Naomi hard. She was vulnerable in ways she hadn't fully acknowledged. Limited mobility, living alone except for Rosa during the day, predictable routines that would be easy to track. If Lena was as dangerous as Dr. Wellstone suggested, writing this book might be putting herself directly in harm's way. I can't stop now, Naomi said quietly. I'm too close. The book is almost finished, and if I stop, if I back down out of fear, then she wins. She gets away with everything she's done, and she'll keep doing it to other people. Your safety is more important than catching a con artist. Is it? Because right now, this book is the only thing that makes me feel like my life has purpose. Like all the pain and struggle meant something. Naomi's voice cracked slightly. I need to finish this, Rosa. I need to see it through. They looked at each other for a long moment, the kitchen light harsh and revealing between them. Finally, Rosa nodded slowly. Then we make sure you're protected. Security system upgrade, cameras, maybe even hire someone to watch the house at night. I'm not letting you do this alone and undefended. Over the next few days, they implemented Rosa's security plan. Cameras were installed at all entry points. The alarm system was upgraded to include motion sensors and direct connection to a security company. Naomi even agreed to keep her phone with her at all times and to check in with Rosa via text at regular intervals. The precautions felt simultaneously paranoid and insufficient. Naomi found herself looking over her shoulder, jumping at unexpected noises, analyzing every car that parked near her house. The awareness of potential danger added a new layer of tension to her already stressful investigation. Meanwhile, the manuscript continued to grow. Naomi wrote the scene where Claire's investigation leads her to multiple victims, each telling similar stories of charm and betrayal. She wrote the moment when Claire realizes Miranda is still actively defrauding people, that the danger is ongoing and immediate. And she wrote the agonizing decision Claire faces, whether to confront her ex-husband directly or to finish building her case in silence. On a Tuesday morning 3 months after the wedding, Margaret called with urgency in her voice. Naomi, we have a problem. A client just discovered a significant unauthorized transfer from his account. He's threatening to sue the firm and file a complaint with the Securities Commission. How much was taken? $75,000, and the transfer authorization has Lena's digital signature on it, but the client swears he never approved it. Naomi's mind raced through the implications. This is bigger than the other incidents. This one can't be easily explained away. No, it can't, and Graham is panicking. He's brought in outside auditors to review all the firm's accounts. If they do a thorough investigation, they're going to find the pattern of smaller thefts. Everything is about to come out. What's Lena doing? That's the strange part. She's completely calm, almost serene. She's helping with the audit, providing access to all the files, acting like she has nothing to hide. It's either the performance of a lifetime or... Margaret trailed off. Or she's already planned her exit strategy, Naomi finished. She knows the audit will expose her, so she's getting ahead of it, playing the helpful, innocent assistant while she arranges to disappear. Do you really think she'd run? I think she's done it half a dozen times before. Why would this be different? Naomi pulled up the timeline she'd been building. Margaret, I need you to watch her carefully. Note any changes in her routine, any unusual purchases, any signs she's preparing to leave, and get me copies of whatever the auditors find before it becomes public. That afternoon, Naomi pushed herself harder on the manuscript. If Lena was preparing to run, the book needed to be finished before she disappeared. She wrote through lunch, through dinner, ignoring Rosa's worried comments about her health. The story was approaching its climax, the moment when all of Miranda's carefully constructed lies would begin to unravel. She was deep into a crucial scene when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was simple and chilling. I know what you're doing. Naomi stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She showed it to Rosa, who immediately called the security company to report it. Could be a wrong number, Rosa said, though her expression said she didn't believe it. Could be spam. Or it could be Lena. Naomi's hands were shaking slightly. She's figured out I'm investigating her. A second text arrived. We should talk. Come to Phil's Coffee on 24th Street tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone. Rosa read it over Naomi's shoulder. You're not going. I have to. If she's reaching out, she's either trying to threaten me into silence or she's worried enough to negotiate. Either way, I need to hear what she has to say. It could be a trap. It's a public place in the middle of the afternoon. What's she going to do? Even as Naomi said it, she remembered Dr. Wellstone's warning about people without conscience being capable of anything. They debated for over an hour. Rosa wanted to call the police, to at least have someone watching from a distance. Naomi argued that any sign of backup would make Lena bolt. Finally, they compromised. Naomi would go to the meeting, but she'd wear a small recording device, and Rosa would be in a car across the street with her phone ready to call 911. That night, Naomi barely slept. She rehearsed possible conversations in her mind, imagining what Lena might say, how she would respond. Part of her was terrified. But another part, the part that had become consumed by this investigation, was almost excited. This was the confrontation scene, the moment when hunter and prey came face to face. The next day moved with agonizing slowness. Naomi tried to work on the manuscript but couldn't focus. She went through her physical therapy routine mechanically, barely registering Rosa's instructions. By the time 1:30 arrived, her nerves were stretched taut. Rosa helped her into the van and drove to the Mission District in tense silence. They parked across from the coffee shop, which was moderately busy with the lunch crowd. Through the window, Naomi could see Lena already seated at a table near the back, looking perfectly composed in a cream-colored sweater and designer jeans. "Last chance to change your mind," Rosa said. "I'm going." Naomi checked that the small recording device was secure in her jacket pocket. "If I'm not out in 30 minutes, call the police." The coffee shop was warm and loud, filled with the hiss of espresso machines and the murmur of conversation. Naomi navigated her wheelchair between tables, aware of curious glances from other customers. Lena watched her approach with an unreadable expression. "Naomi," she said as Naomi reached the table. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." How could I resist such a mysterious invitation? Naomi positioned her wheelchair across from Lena, studying her face for any sign of the sociopath Dr. Wellstone had described. All she saw was a beautiful young woman who looked tired and slightly sad. "I'll get right to the point," Lena said, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. "I know you've been investigating me. I know you've been talking to Margaret, researching my past, building some kind of case against me. I want to know why." "You really have to ask?" Naomi kept her voice level. "You had an affair with my husband while I was recovering from a serious accident. You married him a week after our divorce. You expect me to just accept that and move on?" "I expect you to recognize that Graham and I fell in love, and that his marriage to you was already over before I entered the picture." Lena's tone was reasonable, almost gentle. "I understand you're hurt. I understand you feel betrayed, but turning me into some kind of villain isn't going to change what happened." "Is that what I'm doing? Turning you into a villain?" Naomi leaned forward slightly. "Or am I just uncovering who you actually are? Tell me, Lena, or should I call you Elena? Or Christina? How many names have you used over the years?" Something flickered across Lena's face, too quick to identify. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you? Let me refresh your memory. Elena Montenegro, Seattle, fraud case from 8 years ago. Christina Montero, Portland, theft from an elderly widower. Should I keep going? Because I have a list." Lena was quiet for a long moment, her expression carefully neutral. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, losing some of its warmth. "You've been busy. I'm a researcher. It's what I do." Naomi watched Lena's face, looking for cracks in the facade. "Here's what I can't figure out. Why Graham? You've always targeted isolated, vulnerable people. Graham is successful, connected, surrounded by business partners and friends who could expose you. Why take that risk?" "Maybe because I actually love him," Lena said softly. "Maybe because not everything is a calculation or a con. Maybe I wanted something real for once." The words were delivered perfectly, with just the right amount of vulnerability. But Naomi had spent 3 months studying this woman's pattern, and she recognized the performance. "That's a beautiful story," Naomi said, "almost convincing. But I don't believe you. I think Graham represented your biggest score yet: wealth, status, legitimacy. I think you saw an opportunity when his wife became disabled and his life got complicated. I think you positioned yourself perfectly to be his escape route, and now you're trying to take him for everything he has." Lena's calm finally cracked. Her eyes went cold, and when she spoke, there was no warmth at all in her voice. "You don't know anything about me or what I've been through. You sit in your wheelchair feeling sorry for yourself, blaming everyone else for your failures. Your marriage didn't end because of me. It ended because Graham couldn't stand being tied to someone broken." The words were designed to wound, and they did. But Naomi had been preparing for this, had written this exact confrontation in a dozen different versions in her manuscript. "There it is," she said quietly. "The real you, underneath all the polish and charm. That's what I've been looking for." Lena seemed to realize her mistake. The mask slid back into place, but it was too late. Naomi had seen beneath it. "What do you want?" Lena asked. "Money? Are you trying to blackmail me?" "I want the truth to come out. I'm writing a book about a con artist who preys on vulnerable people. It's fiction, of course, but it's based on very thorough research. When it's published, people are going to start asking questions. Journalists are going to investigate. Your past is going to catch up with you. And you think exposing me will what? Make Graham come back to you?" Lena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "He's never coming back. He chose me. He married me. And even if everything you say is true, which it isn't, he'll never believe you over me. This isn't about getting Graham back. It's about making sure you can't hurt anyone else." Lena stood up abruptly, gathering her purse. "Publish your book. Tell your stories. But be very careful, Naomi. Libel is a serious crime, and accidents happen to people who make themselves targets." She walked out without looking back, leaving Naomi alone at the table with her pulse racing and the recording device capturing every word. It wasn't quite a threat, but it was close enough. And it confirmed everything Naomi had suspected. Lena was dangerous, calculating, and completely without remorse. Rosa met Naomi at the van with her phone already in her hand, clearly ready to dial 911 if needed. The moment Naomi was safely inside, Rosa locked the doors and pulled into traffic. "Well?" Rosa demanded. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually." Naomi pulled out the recording device, rewinding to the key moment. "Listen to this." She played back Lena's voice saying, "Accidents happen to people who make themselves targets." Rosa's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. "That's a threat. We need to take this to the police right now. It's not explicit enough. A good lawyer would argue it was just a figure of speech that I'm being paranoid." Naomi tucked the recorder back into her pocket. "But it tells me everything I need to know. She's worried. She knows the walls are closing in, and she's starting to make mistakes. Mistakes that could get you hurt. Maybe. But I got what I needed from that meeting. I saw the real person underneath the performance. I know exactly who she is now." Naomi stared out the window as they drove through the mission, her mind already composing the scene she would write that evening. "She called me broken, Rosa. Said Graham couldn't stand being tied to someone broken. That wasn't Lena, the character, speaking. That was the real woman, the one without empathy or conscience, showing me exactly how she sees the world." They drove in silence for several blocks before Rosa spoke again. "How much longer until the book is finished?" "Maybe 2 weeks if I push hard. The climax is mostly written. I just need to tie up the resolution and the ending. Then finish it. But Naomi, the moment it's done, we're going somewhere safe until it's published. I don't care if you think I'm overreacting. That woman just threatened you, and I'm not taking chances with your life." Naomi wanted to argue, but the fear in Rosa's voice stopped her. Rosa had been her rock through everything: the accident, the divorce, the obsessive investigation. The least she could do was take her concerns seriously. "Okay," she agreed. 2 weeks to finish the manuscript, then we'll figure out a safe place to wait this out." That evening, Naomi wrote the confrontation scene between Claire and Miranda with visceral intensity. Every word Lena had spoken, every flicker of mask slipping to reveal the emptiness beneath, went into the manuscript. She wrote until her hands cramped and her eyes burned, until Rosa physically removed the laptop and insisted she sleep. The next morning brought news that accelerated everything. Margaret called at 7 a.m., her voice tight with stress. "The auditors found it, all of it, nearly 500,000 in unauthorized transfers over the past 14 months. The pattern is unmistakable, and every fraudulent transaction traces back to Lena's access codes." Naomi sat up in bed, fully awake despite the early hour. "What's Graham saying?" "He's in denial. Keeps insisting there must be another explanation, that Lena would never do this. But the evidence is overwhelming. The auditors are recommending we file a police report immediately." Margaret paused. "Naomi, there's something else. When they were going through Lena's computer files, they found research on you. Detailed research. Your daily routines, your medical appointments, even notes about when Rosa leaves for the day. The chill that ran through Naomi was visceral. She's been stalking me. It looks that way. There are also searches about book publishing timelines, defamation law, and Margaret's voice dropped lower, and search terms about wheelchair accessibility, home security systems, and ways to make accidents look natural. Forward everything to me, Naomi said, her voice steadier than she felt. And Margaret, make copies of all of it before you file the police report. Once this becomes an active investigation, we might not have access to the evidence. After hanging up, Naomi called Rosa into her bedroom and explained what Margaret had found. Rosa's face went pale. That's it. We're leaving today. Pack a bag. I'm taking you to my sister's place in Sacramento. Lena doesn't know about that connection. She can't track you there. I need to finish the book first. You can finish it from Sacramento. See, Naomi, please. This woman has been planning something. Those searches weren't idle curiosity. She's been thinking about how to hurt you. For the first time since starting this investigation, Naomi felt genuine fear. The abstract danger had become concrete. Lena wasn't just a con artist who might sue her. She was someone actively researching ways to harm her, someone who saw her as an obstacle that needed to be eliminated. Give me 48 hours, Naomi said. 2 days to write the ending while we're still here, where I have all my research and notes. Then we'll go to Sacramento and I'll finish the final edits there. Rosa looked like she wanted to argue, but she knew Naomi well enough to recognize immovable determination. 48 hours, not a minute more. And I'm calling my nephew Marcus to stay here overnight. He's an EMT, he's trained in crisis response, and he's 6'4". Nobody's getting past him. Marcus arrived that afternoon, a solid, calm presence, who took the situation seriously without drama. He reviewed the security system, checked all the locks, and positioned himself in the living room with a clear view of both entrances. Rosa made enough food for a week, anxiety channeled into cooking, while Naomi retreated to her office and wrote. The hours blurred together. Naomi wrote the scene where Claire's book manuscript is leaked online before official publication, where readers start connecting the dots between the fictional Miranda and a real person. She wrote the moment when the police finally take the fraud allegations seriously because of the public pressure generated by the book. She wrote Miranda's desperate attempts to discredit Claire, to paint her as a jealous ex-wife making false accusations. And she wrote the slow, inexorable tightening of the net as more victims came forward, as journalists investigated, as the pattern became undeniable even to those who'd been fooled by Miranda's charm. On the second morning, with dark circles under her eyes and her hands shaking from exhaustion and too much coffee, Naomi typed the final scene. Claire sitting in her wheelchair at a cafe, watching news coverage of Miranda's arrest on the television screen above the counter. The ending was quiet, reflective, without triumphant vindication. Claire had exposed the truth, but Graham was still gone. Her body was still damaged. Her life was still irrevocably changed. The only victory was knowing that Miranda would face consequences, and that future victims would be spared. Naomi saved the document, backed it up to 3 different cloud services, and emailed the complete manuscript to her agent. Then she put her head down on the desk and cried. From relief, from exhaustion, from the release of 3 months of obsessive focus finally reaching its conclusion. Rosa found her like that an hour later and simply held her, saying nothing, letting the tears come. When Naomi finally quieted, Rosa helped her transfer to the wheelchair and started packing for Sacramento. They were loading suitcases into the van when Margaret's name flashed on Naomi's phone. Graham filed for divorce this morning, Margaret said without preamble, and Lena is gone. Her apartment is cleared out, her bank accounts are empty, and she's disappeared. The police have issued a warrant for her arrest, but she's vanished. Naomi felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and unease. How's Graham handling it? Badly. He's humiliated, furious, and trying to blame everyone but himself. He actually had the nerve to say this wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been digging into Lena's past, as if you somehow caused her to commit fraud. Margaret sighed heavily. But the evidence is overwhelming. The firm is facing potential lawsuits from defrauded clients. Graham might lose his business license. And he's finally starting to realize that everything you tried to warn him about was true. Has he tried to contact me? Not yet, but he will. His lawyer suggested he might want to reach out, try to smooth things over given the circumstances. Margaret paused. Naomi, there's something else. When the police went through Lena's apartment, they found a file on you. Photos of your house, your schedule, printouts of information about spinal injuries and pain medication interactions, and a burner phone with calls to a number registered to a private investigator who specializes in what he calls personal security situations. The implication was clear. Lena had been planning something more than just disappearing. She'd been researching how to hurt Naomi, possibly how to make it look accidental. The home invasion, the medication overdose, the tragic fall, all scenarios that could be arranged and disguised. "I'm leaving town today," Naomi said. "Rosa's taking me somewhere safe. When's the police report going public?" "Tomorrow morning. The firm is required to notify affected clients, and once that happens, it'll be all over the news." Good. The more public attention this gets, the harder it'll be for Lena to operate under any identity. Someone will recognize her. Someone will make the connection. After saying goodbye to Margaret, Naomi looked at Rosa. "Let's go. I want to be in Sacramento before the story breaks." The drive took 2 hours through afternoon traffic. Rosa's sister lived in a quiet suburb east of the city, a comfortable ranch house with wide doorways and no stairs. She welcomed them with warmth and asked no questions beyond whether Naomi needed anything to be comfortable. That night, lying in an unfamiliar bedroom while Rosa slept in the next room, Naomi checked her email obsessively. Her agent had responded with enthusiasm bordering on shock about the manuscript. "This is extraordinary," Christine had written. "Raw, intense, and absolutely compelling. I'm sending it to your publisher first thing Monday morning. Naomi, this could be your breakout book, but we need to talk about the legal implications. Call me when you can." Naomi was composing a response when a news alert popped up on her phone. Bay Area investment firm embroiled in fraud scandal. She clicked through to read that Graham's company had been forced to disclose significant unauthorized transfers, that a former employee was being sought by police, and that multiple clients were considering legal action. The comments section was already filling with speculation. Someone had posted a photo of Lena from the company website, and readers were noting similarities to other cases of financial fraud. The crowdsourced investigation was beginning exactly as Naomi had hoped it would. Over the next week, the story exploded across local and then national news. Investigative journalists picked up the thread, connecting Lena to multiple unsolved fraud cases across the western states. Dr. Patricia Wellstone gave an interview about the psychological profile of serial con artists. Victims started coming forward, telling stories that matched the pattern Naomi had documented. And through it all, Lena remained missing. Despite the warrant, despite the publicity, despite the APB issued to law enforcement across multiple states, she had vanished as completely as she had in previous cases. Naomi followed the coverage obsessively while making final edits to her manuscript. Christine had negotiated an accelerated publishing timeline, recognizing that the real-world story breaking in the news would create massive interest in the fictionalized version. The book was scheduled for release in 6 months, with a major marketing campaign and early buzz already building from advance copies sent to key reviewers. 2 weeks after fleeing to Sacramento, Naomi finally received the call she'd been expecting. Graham's name appeared on her phone screen. She let it ring 3 times before answering. "Naomi." His voice sounded wrecked, hoarse, and uncertain. "I don't even know where to start. I owe you an apology that I can't begin to adequately express." "You're right, you can't." Naomi kept her tone neutral, not giving him anything. "What do you want, Graham?" "I wanted to tell you that you were right. About everything. About Lena. About the fraud. About me being too blind to see what was happening. I've been a fool, and I've lost everything because of it." "Not everything. You still have your health, your freedom, your ability to rebuild. That's more than a lot of people have." The dig was intentional, and Graham caught it. He was quiet for a moment before continuing. "The police told me about the file Lena kept on you, the research she was doing. Naomi, I think she was planning to hurt you, possibly even kill you. And it's my fault. I brought her into our lives. I defended her when you tried to warn me. I gave her access to everything. If something had happened to you because of my stupidity, but it didn't. I was careful, and I had people protecting me. What happened isn't your fault, Graham. You were a target too, just a different kind." Naomi surprised herself with the compassion in her voice. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the divorce and the months of investigation, she didn't want Graham to be destroyed by this. "You made mistakes, you hurt me badly, but Lena is responsible for her own actions." I heard you're writing a book about all of this. I've written a book. It's being published in 6 months. It's fiction, but it's based on very thorough research. Margaret told me you spent months investigating Lena, building a timeline of her previous crimes. You did what the police couldn't do. You exposed her. His voice dropped lower. Part of me wonders if you did it for me, to protect me even after I'd treated you so badly. I did it for myself, Naomi corrected. I did it because I needed to understand what happened to us, and because I needed to do something meaningful with all the anger and pain. If it helped you at the process, that's a side effect, not the goal. Fair enough. Graham was quiet again. For what it's worth, I never stopped caring about you. I was just too weak to handle what happened after the accident. I took the easy way out, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. I know you will. But Graham, I'm not interested in rehashing our marriage or analyzing what went wrong. That part of my life is over. I'm moving forward now. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry and that I hope you're okay. After the call ended, Naomi sat looking out the window at Rosa's sister's garden, thinking about closure and forgiveness. She didn't forgive Graham, not completely, not yet, but she also didn't hate him anymore. He'd been weak and selfish, but he'd also been manipulated by someone who made manipulation an art form. In Naomi's narrative of what happened, Graham was neither villain nor victim, but simply a flawed person who'd made terrible choices. The real villain was still out there somewhere, living under a new name, possibly already selecting her next target. That knowledge gnawed at Naomi. The book would help. The publicity would make it harder for Lena to operate, but it wasn't the same as seeing her face actual consequences. 3 weeks after the story broke, Naomi received an email from Detective Sarah Kovach of the San Francisco Police Department's Fraud Division. She was the lead investigator on the case and wanted to meet with Naomi to discuss her research. They met at a coffee shop near Rosa's sister's house. Detective Kovach was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and professional, with the weary competence of someone who'd seen too many cases like this. Ms. Reyes, I've reviewed the documentation you provided to Margaret Chen. Your timeline of the suspect's previous activities is more comprehensive than anything we've been able to compile. How did you manage to connect all these cases? I'm a thriller writer. I know how to research, how to find patterns, how to follow threads until they lead somewhere meaningful. Naomi pushed a folder across the table. This is everything I have. Police reports, victim statements, financial records, witness descriptions. It's all there. Detective Kovach flipped through the folder with evident appreciation. This is exceptional work. With your permission, I'd like to share this with other jurisdictions where the suspect operated. We're trying to build an interstate case that will result in more serious charges when we locate her. Of course. Use whatever helps. Naomi paused. Detective, do you think you'll find her? Honestly, people like this can disappear for years. They're good at reinvention, good at staying ahead of investigations. But the level of publicity this case has generated makes it harder. Her face is all over the news. Someone will recognize her eventually. Detective Kovach closed the folder. What made you start investigating in the first place? Was it just curiosity about your husband's new wife, or was there something specific that triggered your suspicion? At first it was just pain, wanting to understand why my marriage ended, why I'd been replaced. But then I started noticing inconsistencies in Lena's story. Small things that didn't add up. And once I started looking, I couldn't stop. I needed to know the truth. And now that you know it, how do you feel? Naomi considered the question carefully. Vindicated, mostly, but also aware that knowing the truth doesn't undo what happened. My marriage is still over. I'm still in this wheelchair. The only difference is that now I understand why, and I know it wasn't really about me being broken or insufficient. It was about a con artist doing what con artists do, finding vulnerable people and exploiting their weaknesses. That's a remarkably healthy perspective for someone who's been through what you have. I'm a storyteller. I process things by turning them into narratives. That's what the book is, my way of making sense of something senseless. Before leaving, Detective Kovach handed Naomi her card. If you hear anything, if she contacts you or you notice anything suspicious, call me immediately. Given what we found in her apartment, the research on you, the contact with the private investigator, I consider you a potential target. Please be careful. That evening, Naomi worked on the author's note that would appear at the end of the book. It was a delicate balance, acknowledging that the story was inspired by real events without making claims that could invite legal trouble. While the characters and specific events in this novel are fictional, she wrote, the pattern of behavior depicted is based on extensive research into cases of identity fraud and financial manipulation. If you or someone you know has been victimized by a con artist, please report it to the authorities. These crimes thrive in silence and shame. Speaking out is the first step toward justice. Christine loved it when Naomi sent it to her. Perfect. It acknowledges the real-world inspiration without opening us up to defamation claims. And it positions the book as not just entertainment, but as a kind of public service, which will play well in the media. The publicity machine was already ramping up. Naomi had been booked for interviews on several podcasts and morning shows, all wanting to talk about her research into financial fraud and how she'd turned personal betrayal into a best-selling thriller. The advance buzz was extraordinary, with early reviews calling it the most timely psychological thriller of the year and a masterclass in turning pain into art. On a rainy afternoon in November, almost 5 months after the wedding that had started everything, Naomi sat in Rosa's sister's living room and watched a news alert flash across her phone. Fugitive con artist arrested in Vancouver. Her pulse racing, she clicked through to read that a woman matching Lena's description had been apprehended at the Canadian border trying to enter under a false passport. The arrest had come after an alert customs officer recognized her from news coverage and questioned inconsistencies in her documentation. Rosa came into the room and saw Naomi's face. What happened? They caught her. They actually caught her. Naomi felt tears streaming down her face, though she couldn't have said whether they were from relief or joy or simple exhaustion. It's over. She's in custody. The news coverage exploded over the next 24 hours. Lena, refusing to give her real name but identified through fingerprints as the suspect in multiple fraud cases, was being held without bail pending extradition. Authorities had found multiple fake passports, over $200,000 in cash, and detailed documentation for 3 separate identities she'd been preparing to use. Graham called again, his voice thick with emotion. I saw the news. They got her. They did. Naomi, this is because of you. Because you didn't let it go, because you built the case that made her capture possible. You did what I was too stupid to see needed doing. I did what I needed to do for myself, but I'm glad she's facing consequences for what she did to you, to me, to all the other people she hurt over the years. When your book comes out, I'm going to read it. I need to understand everything I missed, everything I was too blind to see. It's not going to be easy reading for you. I know. But I owe it to myself to face the truth, even when it's painful. Graham was quiet for a moment. I heard you're doing interviews, becoming a public voice about financial fraud and con artists. That's amazing, Naomi. You're turning this nightmare into something meaningful. After they hung up, Naomi sat thinking about transformation and resilience. A year ago, she'd been at her lowest point, divorced, heartbroken, struggling with both physical pain and emotional devastation. Now she was on the verge of publishing what her agent called a career-defining work. She'd helped bring a serial con artist to justice, and she'd discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. The wheelchair was still part of her reality. The nerve pain still flared unpredictably. Her body was still damaged in ways that would never fully heal. But she'd learned that being broken physically didn't mean being broken as a person. It just meant finding new ways to be whole. Rosa appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of tea. I thought you might want to celebrate. They caught her, the book is coming out, and you're still alive despite her best efforts. That seems worth marking. They clinked mugs together, sitting in companionable silence as rain pattered against the windows. Naomi thought about the ending she'd written for her book, Claire sitting alone in a cafe watching news of Miranda's arrest, feeling not triumph, but simply closure. She'd thought that was realistic, that moment of quiet satisfaction rather than dramatic vindication. But sitting here with Rosa, knowing that Lena was in custody and that her months of obsessive investigation had contributed to that outcome, Naomi felt something more than quiet satisfaction. She felt powerful. Not despite the wheelchair, not despite the betrayal and pain, but because of how she'd chosen to respond to it. She'd taken the worst experience of her life and transformed it into something meaningful, something that might help protect others from similar predators. I want to go home, she said suddenly. Back to San Francisco. I'm done hiding. Are you sure? Lena's in custody, but there could be accomplices, people who helped her. It might still not be safe. I'm sure. I have a life to rebuild, a book launch to prepare for, physical therapy to get back to. I can't live in fear forever. Naomi looked at Rosa. Besides, I have the best caregiver in California watching out for me. I think I'll be okay. They returned to San Francisco the next day. The house felt different when Naomi wheeled through the front door, like she was seeing it with fresh eyes after months away. This was the home she'd fought to keep in the divorce, the space she'd insisted on maintaining even when it would have been easier to sell and start over somewhere without memories of Graham embedded in every room. Now those memories felt distant, like they belonged to a different person. The woman who'd lived here with Graham, who'd built a careful life of success and surface-level happiness, was gone. In her place was someone harder, wiser, and infinitely more interesting. The weeks following Naomi's return to San Francisco moved with a momentum that felt both exhilarating and surreal. Her publisher accelerated the book's release date, capitalizing on the massive public interest in Lena's arrest. Advance copies went out to major reviewers, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. Publishers Weekly called it a searing exploration of betrayal and resilience. Kirkus described it as the kind of psychological thriller that transcends genre to become essential reading. Christine called almost daily with updates about foreign rights deals, audiobook negotiations, and film studio interest. Naomi, this is unprecedented. We have 3 major production companies bidding for adaptation rights, and the book isn't even officially out yet. You've tapped into something that people desperately want to understand. How smart people get fooled, how con artists operate, how victims can reclaim their power. It still feels strange, Naomi admitted, sitting at her kitchen table with her laptop open to yet another interview request. I wrote this book to make sense of what happened to me. I didn't expect it to become a cultural phenomenon. The best art comes from authentic pain transformed into universal truth. That's what you've done here. Christine paused. Have you thought about what you're going to say when interviewers ask about the real-life inspiration? Because they will ask. I'll tell them the truth, that I experienced betrayal during a vulnerable time, that I noticed patterns that didn't add up, and that I chose to investigate rather than accept the surface story. I'll acknowledge that the book is fiction inspired by real events without identifying specific people or claiming it's a documentary. Perfect. That's exactly the line we need to walk. The first major interview was scheduled for a popular true crime podcast called Deception Decoded. The host, Melanie Chang, had built a reputation for thoughtful, in-depth conversations about fraud, manipulation, and the psychology of deception. For doing this, Melanie said as they settled in, your book is getting incredible buzz, and obviously it's resonating because of the parallels to recent news. But I want to talk about more than just the scandal. I want to understand how you transform personal trauma into this powerful narrative. That's the question I've been asking myself, Naomi replied. I think it starts with refusing to accept the role of victim. After my accident, after my divorce, I could have let those experiences define me as someone broken and discarded. Instead, I decided to be the investigator, the storyteller, the person who exposes truth rather than hiding from it. In the book, your protagonist Claire is a novelist in a wheelchair whose husband leaves her for a younger woman who turns out to be a con artist. It's clearly inspired by your own life. Was it difficult to fictionalize something so personal? Yes and no. Fiction gave me permission to explore emotions and motivations in ways that straight memoir wouldn't have. I could make Claire stronger than I felt, give her insights I only developed in hindsight, and create a narrative arc that felt satisfying, even though real life is messier. But the core emotions, the betrayal, the humiliation, the determination to understand why, those are completely authentic. Melanie leaned forward, her expression intent. Let's talk about the villain, Miranda. She's one of the most chilling antagonists I've encountered in fiction because she feels so real. How did you develop her character? I researched extensively, police reports, victim statements, psychological profiles of serial con artists. What I learned is that people like Miranda don't see others as human beings with feelings and rights. They see the world as a game where other people are either obstacles or resources. They're extraordinarily good at reading what people need emotionally and becoming exactly that. It's not empathy. They don't feel what others feel. It's tactical mimicry. They study human behavior the way an actor studies a role. And in your research, you discovered that the woman who married your ex-husband matched this pattern. Naomi chose her words carefully. I discovered patterns that suggested someone in my life was not who they claimed to be. The investigation that followed became the foundation for the book. That person has since been arrested on multiple fraud charges, correct? I can't comment on ongoing legal cases, but I can say that researching this book brought me into contact with numerous victims of identity fraud and financial manipulation. Their stories informed every page of what I wrote. The interview continued for over 2 hours, covering everything from the writing process to the challenges of investigating while disabled to the broader societal issues around how we grant trust. When Melanie finally packed up her equipment, she looked at Naomi with genuine admiration. This is going to be a blockbuster episode. You're articulate, insightful, and you have an incredible story to tell. I predict your book is going to start a national conversation about financial fraud and the psychology of deception. After Melanie left, Rosa brought Naomi a late lunch. How do you feel about becoming a public figure? This is going to change your life in ways you might not have anticipated. I know, but I think I'm ready for it. For 3 years, I've been hiding from the public eye, from my own potential, from the fullness of life, because I was afraid of being seen as diminished. Naomi looked at Rosa. The book gave me my voice back. If speaking out helps other people recognize con artists before they get hurt, if it helps victims feel less ashamed of being fooled, then the exposure is worth it. 2 weeks before the official publication date, Naomi received an unexpected letter. It came through her publisher's office, forwarded by Christine with a note saying, "You need to see this." The return address was a county jail in Vancouver. Naomi's hands shook slightly as she opened it. The letter was handwritten in elegant script on standard-lined paper. "Dear Naomi," it began, "you don't know my real name, and I've gone by so many that I barely remember it myself. But you know me as Lena. I'm writing because I've had a lot of time to think in here, and I've realized some things that I think you deserve to hear. You were right about me. About all of it. I did target Graham deliberately. I researched him, learned about your accident, positioned myself to be exactly what he needed when he was most vulnerable. I've been doing variations of this for 15 years, since I was 19 years old, and discovered that I could become anyone people wanted me to be. I won't insult you by claiming I feel remorse. I've been evaluated by enough psychologists to know I lack whatever mechanism creates genuine empathy in most people. But I can intellectually understand that what I did caused harm. To you, to Graham, to the others over the years. And I can respect that you refuse to be destroyed by it. You're probably wondering why I'm writing, partly because I'm bored and facing decades in prison with nothing but time, but mostly because I want you to know that you won. Not by exposing me, though you did that brilliantly. You won by refusing to let what I did define you, by turning your pain into something meaningful, by being stronger than I gave you credit for. I underestimated you from the beginning. I saw a woman in a wheelchair dealing with chronic pain, abandoned by her husband. I assumed you were broken in ways that mattered. I was wrong. You were never broken. You were always gathering your strength, preparing your counterattack, building the case that would eventually destroy me. If I were capable of admiring people rather than just using them, I might admire you. Instead, I'll simply acknowledge that you beat me at a game I thought I'd mastered. Well played, Naomi. I hope your book is everything you hoped it would be. It was signed simply with L. Naomi read the letter 3 times, trying to parse genuine insight from manipulation. Even in custody, facing serious charges, Lena was still performing. The admission of what she'd done was calculated to seem honest while protecting herself from making statements that could be used against her legally. The praise was designed to flatter and disarm. And yet, beneath the performance, Naomi sensed something almost like authenticity. The recognition that she'd lost this particular game and that Naomi had outmaneuvered her. She showed the letter to Rosa, who read it with a deepening frown. Even now, she's trying to manipulate you, trying to get inside your head. I know, but it doesn't bother me the way she probably hoped it would. If anything, it confirms everything I wrote about her in the book. She literally cannot stop performing, even when there's no obvious benefit to it. Naomi folded the letter carefully. I'm going to keep this. It's a reminder that everything I exposed was real. The letter arrived at the perfect moment. just as Naomi's final interviews before publication were being scheduled. She mentioned it briefly to the journalist from the New York Times who came to interview her for a major feature piece. The person whose crimes inspired the book actually wrote to you from jail? The journalist, a woman named Andrea Moss, looked fascinated. What did she say? Essentially that I won, that she underestimated me and I outmaneuvered her. It was strange. Even facing decades in prison, she was still trying to control the narrative, to position herself as the gracious loser acknowledging a worthy opponent. Naomi shook her head. But that framing misses the point entirely. This wasn't a game or a competition. It was about justice and truth and protecting future victims. Do you consider yourself a victim? I consider myself someone who experienced victimization and chose to respond by investigating and exposing the pattern. Victim is a state of powerlessness. What I became was an advocate, an investigator, and eventually a voice for people who've experienced similar betrayals. Andrea's article, published 3 days before the book's release, was extraordinary. Titled "The Novelist Who Caught a Con Artist," it framed Naomi's story as both personal triumph and broader social commentary. It discussed the unique vulnerability of people dealing with disability or medical crisis, how con artists specifically target those moments of weakness, and how Naomi had transformed her own experience into a manual for recognizing and resisting manipulation. The article went viral. Within 24 hours, it had been shared over 100,000 times, with comments ranging from admiration to anger at Graham to demands for harsher sentences for financial fraud. Naomi's social media following exploded from a few hundred loyal readers to over 50,000 people actively discussing the case, the book, and the broader issues it raised. Publication day arrived with the kind of fanfare usually reserved for established best-selling authors. The book debuted at number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list and climbed to number 1 within a week. Reviews were near universal raves, with critics praising both the propulsive thriller plotting and the deeper emotional resonance of Naomi's exploration of betrayal and resilience. Graham called the day after the book hit number 1. Naomi almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of her. I read it, he said without preamble. Cover to cover in one sitting. Naomi, I don't know what to say. Seeing our marriage through your eyes, understanding how much you noticed that I thought you'd missed, realizing how completely I was manipulated, it's devastating. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to tell a true story about how deception works and how people survive it. I know, but reading it felt like looking in a mirror and seeing myself clearly for the first time. The character of James, Claire's ex-husband, he's weak and selfish and so easily manipulated because he's desperate to avoid discomfort. That's exactly who I was. Graham's voice was thick with emotion. There's a scene where Claire reflects that James didn't leave her because she was broken, but because he was. That line has been echoing in my head for days. It's true. Your inability to handle my injury, your need for an easy escape, your willingness to believe obvious lies because they made you feel better about your choices. All of that came from your weakness, not mine. I know that now. Too late to fix anything, but I know it. He was quiet for a moment. There's something I need to tell you. The firm is bankrupt. Between the legal fees, the settlements to defrauded clients, and the complete loss of reputation, I'm losing everything. The business, the house, probably my professional license. I'm going to have to start over from basically nothing. Naomi waited for the surge of satisfaction she'd expected to feel at this news. Instead, she felt only a distant sadness for the life they'd both lost. I'm sorry. I know you worked hard to build that business. Not as hard as you worked to build your career, and I never gave you proper credit for it. I treated your writing like a hobby while treating my investment firm like important work. The truth is, you were creating something that mattered while I was just moving money around. Graham let out a bitter laugh. And now your book is a massive bestseller while my life is in ruins. I'd call that poetic justice if it weren't so painful to live through. It's not justice or revenge. It's just consequences. You made choices, Lena made choices, and now you're both dealing with the results. That's not me punishing you, that's just reality. I know, but Naomi, I want you to understand something. Reading your book made me realize that I loved you. Not the shallow, comfortable love I thought was enough, but real love. The kind that should have made me fight for our marriage instead of taking the easy way out. I loved you, And I destroyed us anyway because I was too weak to handle the hard parts of love. Tears pricked at Naomi's eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. Thank you for saying that, but Graham, we can't go back. Even if you wanted to, even if I wanted to, we can't rebuild what we had. Too much has happened. We're different people now. I know. I'm not asking for another chance. I'm just asking you to know that I finally understand what I lost, and I'm sorry, truly, deeply sorry, for everything I put you through. After they hung up, Naomi sat looking out of her window at the San Francisco afternoon, thinking about forgiveness and moving forward. She didn't forgive Graham, not entirely, but she also didn't hate him anymore. He'd been weak and made terrible choices, but he was also being genuinely destroyed by those choices in ways that satisfied no one. His life was imploding while hers was exploding in the best possible way, and there was something almost tragic about the complete reversal of their fortunes. The following week brought the announcement that Naomi's book was being adapted into a limited series by a major streaming platform. The producer, a woman named Tessa Cardoza, who'd built a reputation for prestige psychological dramas, came to San Francisco to meet with Naomi about the adaptation. "I want you involved in the writing process," Tessa said over coffee, at the same cafe where Naomi had met with Margaret months earlier. "Your voice is so distinctive in the book, and I want to preserve that in the adaptation. Plus, you understand the mechanics of how con artists operate better than any writer I could hire. I've never written for television. You've written a masterclass in building suspense and developing complex characters. The format is different, but the skills translate. And honestly, I think having you as a writer on the project will give it an authenticity that audiences will respond to." Tessa pulled out a folder with preliminary development materials. "I'm envisioning 6 episodes. We open with the wedding, just like the book, with Claire watching from the shadows. Then we flash back to show the marriage before the accident, the crash, the slow deterioration of the relationship, the investigation, the confrontation, and finally the resolution when Miranda is caught." Naomi looked through the materials, seeing her story transformed into scene breakdowns and character descriptions. "Who do you see playing Claire?" "We're thinking of offering it to Rebecca Hall. She's got the intelligence and emotional depth the role requires, and she's been vocal about wanting to play more characters with disabilities. We'd work with disability consultants to make sure everything is portrayed authentically. I want creative approval over how the wheelchair use and disability aspects are depicted," Naomi said firmly. "I've lived this reality for 3 years. I won't have it portrayed in ways that are inaccurate or exploitative." "Absolutely. That's exactly why I want you involved," Tessa smiled. "Naomi, this is going to be huge. The book is already a cultural phenomenon. The adaptation is going to reach even more people and start even more conversations. You're going to be one of the most influential voices in discussions about fraud, disability, and resilience." The weight of that realization settled over Naomi. She'd written the book to make sense of her own experience, never imagining it would position her as any kind of public advocate. But that's exactly what was happening. Interview requests came daily from major media outlets. Organizations working on disability rights and fraud prevention wanted her to speak at their events. Book clubs across the country were reading her novel and using it to discuss broader questions about trust, vulnerability, and justice. One afternoon, Naomi received an email from a woman named Jennifer Torres. "I just finished your book, and I'm crying as I write this," Jennifer had typed. "My husband left me 6 months ago after I was diagnosed with MS. He said he couldn't handle watching me deteriorate, that he needed to protect himself emotionally. I felt like I was broken and unworthy of love. But reading Claire's story made me realize that his inability to cope was his failing, not mine. Thank you for writing this. Thank you for showing that being disabled doesn't mean being diminished." Naomi read the email 3 times, then forwarded it to Rosa with a simple note. This is why it mattered. Similar messages arrived daily.